Okay, I'm going to open up the Architecture Board of Review for today, which is January 10th, 2001, or 2011, I'm sorry. Quick change in the schedule. Both Chris Manson-Hing, who is the chair, and Don Sherry, who is the vice chair, are not here today, so they asked me to step in, so I'm going to be the assistant chair or whatever for today. So we will start. Items A and B that were on the general business, we are going to postpone 2 weeks, and that was for the election of the chair and vice chair for 2011, and the consent calendar review appointments. So we're going to move on to item C, which is public comment. Any member of the public wishing to address the board for an item that's not on the agenda? Seeing nobody, I will move on to item D unless staff has any introductory comments. Do you have anything to say? Okay, moving on to item D, which is the approval of the minutes for ABR on December 13th, 2010. Do I have a first and a second?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
First by Keith, second by Chris. Any comments? I reviewed them online and I thought they were fine, but does anybody else have comments on the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote for the minutes as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One abstention is Clay. Moving on to item E, which is the consent calendar of January 3rd. Do we have a first and a second for that?
Mr. Chair, there were no items that week, so we didn't have a consent calendar on January 3rd.
That's fine. Then there is no consent calendar. Moving on to the consent calendar for today, which is January 3rd. Do I have a first and a second? January 10th, I'm sorry, for today. January 10th? First by Gary.
Second the motion.
Second by Keith.
Okay. For consent calendar today, we had item A, 936 San Pascal, was postponed 1 week. Item B, 117 Harbor Way, got final approval with conditions. Item C, 30 South Quarantina Street, got a final approval with conditions. Item D, 3430 State Street, was continued. Item E, 535 East Montecito Street, was a review after final for some landscaping changes, and that was approved as submitted. And consent today was reviewed by Chris Gilliland and Gary Mosley.
Well, thank you, too. Any other discussion on that? I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to announcements. Requests by applicants for continuous or withdrawals.
Mr. Chair, the applicant for item 5, 826 Delavina Street, Henry Lenny, called me this morning. He was having some problems getting his drawings sent to him so that he could print them out here locally and bring them to the meeting. So I told him if he was able to do that before we adjourn the meeting that he could come in. I said just come in if you get your drawings. He's next to the last item. So
okay.
We could possibly hear it after item 6, or maybe we'll have to postpone it for 2 weeks.
Okay. Just for curiosity question, item 6 is a new item. It's the first time it's heard. How soon can we hear that, since it's a posted agenda at 5:15? Can we hear that at 15 minutes early, or can we hear it even earlier than that?
I think that's been your policy, that you would go
15 minutes?
I know that's been the policy for items where we send out a public notice.
If we could hear that, I'm just asking because Jaime's here, if we could hear that at 4:30-ish, then I know we can take that early.
Staff doesn't like to do that because we've actually had the public upset about having to come to the meeting and the item's over. So what we've done is cheated a little bit by saying 15 minutes early. They can come in, the item's still going on, and we can still open the public comment and have them participate. Feel like they participate.
That's what I want to clarify. So I put down 5 o'clock for item 6. Anything else? Moving on to item G, which is subcommittee reports, which I don't think there are any. So,
Mr. Chair,
oops.
Getting back to announcements, I'll be stepping down for item 1.
Oops. Thank you very much. Any other announcements?
There is a meeting for the 101
DRT tomorrow. Wednesday at 10 a.m. that I'll be attending, I believe, with Chris Manson-Hing if he's here. So, just FYI.
Great. Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to item 1, which is 2550 Treasure Drive. This is a continued item. And I'm going to have Clay actually read the minutes of the previous meeting, just when we get all organized. Turn this on. Nice. You can hit that oval. There you go. Clay, when you're ready. Oops, pretty long list.
Mr. Chair, this is item number 1, 2550 Treasure Drive. Do you want me to read the description, or do you just want to?
It should be Treasure Drive.
That's what it says.
Okay.
Motion, continuing indefinitely to the Planning Commission, return to full board with the following comments. Number 1, the compatibility analysis is as follows. Complies, it's compatible, appropriate, no impacts, not block views, so it meets all the compatibility findings. Project mass, bulk, and scale is appropriate for the site. The board appreciates the overall design of the project. Number 3, study incorporating the mechanical well as a tower element or architectural element or removed completely. Number 4, study the elevator tower entry. Number 5, study the overall architecture of the entry to either center the doors and or raise the roof. Number 6, on the south elevation, study the shed roof and column extending from the lower floor. Number 7, on the east elevation, study the cantilever, the width of the columns, and the overall depth of the overhang. Number 8, on the east elevation, simplify the architectural elements, in parentheses, ornate handrail, lights on each column, elaborate trellis, etc., to be consistent with the simplicity of the rest of the project. Those are all architectural comments. For landscaping, we had number 1, restudy the entry walk from the cottage road to reduce the straight lines and rigidity. And number 2, study the potential use of either fencing or a seat wall in lieu of the proposed site walls on the south elevation of the plaza.
Wonderful. Well, you have your name for the record and your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair and members. My name is Susan Basham. I'm an attorney with Price, Postel and Parma, and I'm here today with Todd Kilburn, Kilburn Architects in Seattle. He's the project architect. I'd like to give you just a little bit more background, if I might, on what has happened since we were last here. We were here on October 4th when those present made the comments that have just been read into your record, and advised that we could move forward toward the Planning Commission review. After that, we received a DART letter indicating certain incompleteness items, and after meeting with planning staff, came to a conclusion that one of the issues that needs to be addressed in this process is the future of Building D. You may remember that the way this project has been designed, the Life Center will become the home of a number of uses that are currently existing on the campus. It's not expanding uses, it's actually creating a central location for the uses. And it's moving some uses from Building D, which means that space will be vacated in Building D, which is an existing building that's been there since, we think, the 1980s. So staff had asked, what will become of Building D? What's going in there? And we have provided a list of the various uses that will then be moved into Building D. In other words, sort of we're playing musical uses here. And in the end, staff said, well, if you're going to be modifying the interior of Building D, we would like to know right now how that's going to go. We think that Building D ultimately, when it's renovated, is going to require its own amendment to the existing conditional use permit. So why not do that at the same time? Why not seek those two approvals simultaneously? And after discussing that with our client, we decided that was a pretty good idea. So Mr. Kilburn went back to the drawing board and did the work that's necessary to bring Building D forward to you for conceptual review, so it'll essentially catch up in the process with the Life Center. At the same time, he worked on some planning and other departmental requests in relation to the design of the project, which he can discuss with you, and then he also worked on responding to the concerns that were raised at your October 4th meeting. So we're actually coming back with revisions that are being driven in part by the need to get Building D in front of you before we can go forward to the Planning Commission, but also, since we're here, taking the opportunity to go through the the responses to your concerns that were raised previously.
Thank you. You're on.
That was a great, I guess, prologue. Would you like to start with Building D, since that kind of is the new project?
What sheet do you think you know?
Let's see.
Cool.
What's
5-1
down here?
or 5-4?
I'm not sure how much I need to go into the plans themselves, but there's...
Just how the exterior is changing is all that we're concerned. The
Okay.
interior use and the interior remodel is not of our concern.
Okay, maybe we should look at there's some existing elevations. So
On sheet A51?
A52.
52, okay.
Okay, Susan mentioned this is an existing building on campus. It's been there for quite some time. It's a low-slung one-story building, stucco or plaster facade, essentially with black gridded windows and oak gridded doors. And so just very straightforward elevation, front or the entry side, back, and the two ends. And I'll just start now with, we didn't touch the two ends, and on the back, all we're doing is removing a window. So the only changes are on essentially the front elevation where there's a colonnade, and I think the photos illustrate that.
Okay.
Return to the proposed elevations. We're not trying to reinvent anything. We're not trying to change the look or feel or the ambiance of the character of the building. All we're doing is replicating existing architectural elements, matching the existing doors and matching the existing windows in the new openings. And so there's 4 new openings on the colonnade side. We have a set of new doors, a new window that matches the existing windows. Again, new doors that match the existing doors. And then a new archway that enters into a new spa area.
Interior or exterior?
It's exterior.
Okay.
And so that's just an open breezeway. Again, on the rear elevation, which is actually quite hidden by a lot of landscaping, existing foliage, we're just removing a window. And then again, on the ends, no change to the building.
And that's all that's happening to...
Is that this window?
I believe...
Let me put that right here in the center.
Behind that Bougainvillea, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's back behind here, actually.
If you don't mind one quick second. So, sorry, TV guy. This window is here. This one is this big one. The one that's being removed is behind this bougainvillea. And actually, you have 2 chimneys that are not shown in elevation. That's a minor, just
We're not
observation.
changing.
Yeah, not changing. Okay.
And I also brought, some modeling of it if you wanted
I
to see it.
don't think we need to see
Yeah.
it. If we have any questions, we'll come back to this.
Okay,
So that's all you're doing to Building D?
that's correct.
Good. Let's go over the main Life Center building.
Okay. Again, I'm not sure where best to look at the changes, but maybe a combination of the building elevations and then the kind of the renderings. Let's see here.
And also the plaza plan in the front or the entry
Okay.
approaching the building.
Yeah, we could look at that first. We'll get there. I think it's a good place to start that kind of covers the several of the comments from our last meeting. And that was at the entry, the lower entry, we had more of a rigid kind of stepped plan view of the entry walkway. And on the upper entry, we had more of this organic kind of flowing landscape and feel that kind of played off of an existing oak tree and the existing fountain. So we were asked to take another look at the lower entry, which we did, and we really softened that up. We tried to kind of create more of an organic flow into the building that matches kind of the aesthetic we were creating up top. So that was one of the main changes there.
Did you have that illustrated in one of your... I thought there was an elevation that showed that.
Well, I think right now we're just talking about in plan view,
okay.
so
All right,
we'll get
sorry.
to that. A couple other minor changes that I'm not sure affect the exterior, but we had to move some walls around in the mechanical area to protect some trees. But essentially, that's the lower entry change. The upper area, we were also asked to take a look at perhaps some architectural changes that would help soften the plaza area. And what we've done there is really took a closer look at this. We had a nice curving stair that comes up into the building, which we really like, and we think it leads people into the main entry. But we also had kind of a sea of pavers that felt maybe a little too harsh, and so we've added larger landscape areas to break up the space and also lead into the building. On this side, we had a wall which we've now turned into a seat wall that we think is a nice benefit to allow the residents to sit here and also interact with this plaza where we're going to have open dining area.
Okay. Now how about look at the elevations or the...
Okay.
East elevation, we had two comments having to do with the detailing, I believe, in here and at there.
And so we took a look at your suggestions, and actually we felt all the suggestions were really quite well taken. There were things that we felt we needed to look at anyway as we progressed with developing the project. One of the questions here was to take a look at the width of the columns, the size of the columns, and make sure the proportions felt right. And so we actually looked at that a little more carefully and actually widened them so they have a larger mass. And then we're asked to look at how far out the building cantilevers and how far recessed these doors are. And we actually decided we needed to pull them forward. So we moved the lower level plan towards us on this elevation by about 1.5 feet. And again, increase the size of the columns from, I believe they were 18 inches square before, to 2 feet, which I think has a nice proportion now. Secondly, on the east...
Simplify the ornate handrails, lights on each column, elaborate the trellis.
Yeah, we looked at this carefully too, and the only thing we did here is we did remove the lights on the columns. They seemed a little unnecessary, particularly having them on the outside of the column, which really we don't need. But other than that, we really felt that this area is where we really want to celebrate this space, and this is where the residents are going to spend a lot of time. We want them to have the feel that it's a handcrafted space. It's something that actually does have some detail and some ornamentation for them to kind of touch and feel. I think if you look at in the renderings, that just removing the lights did a lot for that, and we just feel that again that architecturally we really want to kind of celebrate the detail at this one location.
Okay. Let's move on to the other elevation.
Now this area, the kind of the main upper level entry, as you'll recall, we had kind of a larger gable and an archway that was offset from the main doors themselves. We had a chimney element for the elevator penthouse. So we went back and looked at this and felt that the idea of making a little more symmetrical entry seemed to make a lot of sense. So what we did was just kind of incorporated the entry into its own architectural element. We raised the ceiling height and added glass around the doors and a transom light, and then turned the elevator tower into an actual little tower element. So it is asymmetrical. We feel balanced still with the entryway being symmetrical.
Okay. And then the mechanical well, what kind of changes happened there?
Yeah, the mechanical well, after making all those other changes, which we felt really were the most important architecturally, the main entries, some of the areas that people really are going to see, we came back to this element and tried several different things, including pulling it out, trying to turn it into some part of the building as was suggested. But in doing so, it seemed to call, in our opinion, too much attention to it when we really want it to be something quiet and just to go away, and we want the focus on the main entry and the courtyard. And so the only thing we did was we changed the detail of the cornice a bit. We're looking at it as sort of a placeholder for mechanical equipment that we don't know exactly is going to go in there. And if we can diminish it in any way, obviously we will. But our sense right now is that it's an element we just want to just kind of not spend too much time with trying to make it something it's not, when we can just hopefully have it just quietly go away. And I might add, there is a large oak here that we're saving, and landscaping. We think it's going to be relatively unimportant, and no one's going to see it.
Okay. Is there anything else architecturally for the building before we go on to the landscape plan?
One last thing, we were asked to take a look at this element here.
Oh.
Previously, it was only seen, I think, on the model, and we didn't. There wasn't much change, but we just want to emphasize the design will be a wood beam sitting on top of this column with open rafter tails on top of it. Cool. So that's changed.
Let me just see if there's any others. These are sections. Reflected ceiling plan, okay. Let's move on to the landscape site area. I want to maybe quickly go through the model since they're your 3D images. We'll just let us study them for a second.
Yeah, I think you could just take a look at them on your own. I did bring some larger ones if you want to just pass them around, if it's easier.
Okay. So your landscape plan.
Yeah, the
Replanting.
landscape plan, the only changes we've made here are just added planting areas within the plaza and at the entry. Just some small areas that would just soften this, direct the residents into the entryway. I didn't take a hard look at what we were planting here,
Oh, okay.
since the plans were slightly changed.
Someone else will.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was really it. And just the change in the kind of the shape of the walkway.
This walkway right here. Anything else for your presentation?
I think that covers everything.
Great. Well, I'll open up public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing nobody, does staff have any comments? Are there any letters? No? Amazing. I'll close public comment and return it back to the board for questions of the applicant. I had one quick question. It seems like where the front door would be and this, these two islands aren't lined up. And is there a particular reason? Was there a tree here that we're saving? Or is this lining up with hardscape elsewhere in the building? Or did you not want it to line up intentionally?
Yeah, we intentionally didn't want it to be this straight shot. We wanted to feel a little more meandering, but still lead you into the entry.
Okay. That was my question. Someone jump in whenever they're ready.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
What sheet number are you looking at?
Actually, if we can go to the renderings.
The renderings. Let's go with those bigger ones.
8.1, or I would use these. I had a question on one of these. I just saw it, so bear with me for a second. Am I reading this correctly, that this gabled end really takes off from the building and then it's supported here, so that's roofed area? Is that what I'm looking at? Is that
Yeah.
I saw this in the rendering. I was
It's
kind
so
of
funny
wondering what that is.
because if anyone was going to catch that, I knew you guys were. That's just a function.
Sorry.
That's just a function of the model. That's just a mess up with the model. So it doesn't really do that. The building or the wall's going to come out, and this is actually going to be a cathedral area underneath here. But obviously, this detail hasn't been, worked
Okay.
out. But it's not going to look like that. I can tell you that.
Okay. I spend too much time looking at these things, I think.
And
So
we're
the
using
same
this
on
kind of a tool right
this
now.
side. You have the same Because what I was getting confused about was the depth of this and the depth of that. And it looked like in plan that was a flat wall. That was one wall in plane.
Yeah, I think if we look at it in plan, the depth's the same, and then it's actually going to be this gabled wall is going to hang down, and then inside there it'll be a cathedral ceiling with open beams.
And these are intended to be plaster?
Yes.
Okay. And I had one more question, if we can go to the site plan, which you're on. It says here the existing utility area to be relocated. Is this required utility for this building, and do you know where it's going?
I don't know if it's for that building necessarily, and at this point we don't know exactly where it's going either, but not there.
Okay. That dovetails into my next question, which was about trash and recycling. This seems like a potentially inopportune place to have that in terms of servicing it. So I was just wondering if this were to stay and some trash enclosure be designed or something. This is pretty close to the building here, though. But this seems, in order to service this, somebody's got to wheel something all the way
To a road.
Yeah,
I don't even know where.
I can explain it to you, or I can explain the thought behind it. This is their main dining hall, and it's
Okay.
at the same grade as this. So their main kitchen is here. This is going to be a secondary, obviously, secondary kitchen and dining area. So we wanted to have the connection between here and here pretty straightforward. So they're going to come in through the back of the house, which is the kitchen area right here. Their main pickup area is right here off a loading dock. So this is all in the same grade if they wheel the trash and recycling to here. That's the concept, and that's how the our client wanted to operate.
This is a dining hall. The restaurant's in here.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, this is a secondary restaurant for the activities that are happening in this building.
Well, not necessarily, just for residence use in general.
Cafe.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this mechanical well is for the kitchen equipment that's located in this building. There's also a kitchen and dining hall in this facility.
That's correct.
So they might be making stuff there, wheeling it over, or they might be making it here.
Correct.
That's correct. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for those comments. Anybody else? Questions? No questions? No questions? Oop.
Segue off Clay's question, and that would be the mechanical area. They call for a new CMU wall on there. Do you have a detail of that CMU wall, or do we have heights of that wall, or what that wall is going to be?
He's referring to this wall right here.
And if you are going to put new cooling towers on, are those cooling towers going to be taller than the existing cooling towers, or it's just that type of information,
Right,
so
well-
we know if they're going to be disappear or not.
Yeah, the plan right now is for it to completely disappear. The idea is to be doing a sound wall, which they don't currently have, and plaster the CMU and hide and disguise all the mechanical at that location. I don't know the exact height of the wall, but it's going to be sufficient to hide the equipment.
Yeah, that looks like about a 4-foot high wall, unless it's recessed below grade. But I made a note that the next time you come, we'll ask for additional information in that zone. By then, you'll have some additional information on what equipment you'll be having. I had one question on the elevations, and it's a minor thing. I guess I was wondering if this is the floor plan, if some of this was a furred down soffit, and if there was an opportunity to make an arc in between each one of these corbels, or is the floor joist at that level?
I think at this time there wouldn't be much room to do that. I think the structure is going to fill up most of that, plus mechanical. I think also, just in my opinion, and looking at this a lot, I mean, I think having an arch here is nice. If you see this in elevation from the other end, it, I think is going to have a nice architectural feature, and doing a double arch I think might be overkill there.
Okay. Good comments?
I just have a few short comments from the perspective of the landscape plan. Actually, can I have that little rendering there? I believe I was the one who mentioned, possibly adding the seat wall here and trying, what I was thinking is that this, to me, looked pretty stark, and I like that you've broken it up with additional planters. And I still think we run into a bit of the same problem in that we have this hard surface up to another hard surface, and it seems very stark to me. So I guess what I'm wondering is, I know you need that wall because it then slopes down behind that, right? Just wondering if there's any way to bring in even a slight planter just to soften that where those two meet, or even a vine pocket to get something trained up on there. And then with the seat wall here, having the back to it, to me, it kind of separates you from that planting bed. I think when I made that comment, I think I had mentioned a possible seat wall, and in my mind, it had no back to it, so that you'd kind of see into that bed a little bit more. But
Can I respond to that? Just
sure,
real quick?
yeah, please.
I agree wholeheartedly, but with the senior residents, we got a little worried that they might
Like their back
follow
support.
that.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Not a problem. I think that was pretty much it, though. I mean, if there's anything you can do to just soften that area a little bit. I know you have some benches called out, and a couple over here. So, not a huge thing at all, but to me that looked a little stark. But I like the other changes that were made, especially to this entry on the back side of the.
This end over here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's it for my comments.
Gary or Clay? Oh, back up. Any comments on Building D? No. Okay. Gary or Clay?
I'll go.
All right, you're up.
Unless, I'm going to echo the comments on the entry. I'm kind of happy with the symmetry of this. I don't feel like the mechanical well is diminished, as you said, and not is going to disappear. I really feel like the size of this is still pretty large, and I think this kind of makes its point that it is still pretty large. And looking at the plants and looking at their use, not future use, but looking at current use right now, I just don't see it. The cooling towers are going down below in the well, so it's not going to be used for a cooling tower. It's not going to be used for refrigeration equipment. It may be used for some ventilation equipment, but ventilation equipment is typically fairly small. And I think that this particular element can be reduced or be incorporated more into the space that's there. And I think it would make this outdoor area right here a little more attractive. So I'm still not really that pleased with that element. The other ones, the thickening of the columns, I think are great, and the rest of it is great. On Building D, the only comment that I would have had is there's the new archway. We can go the new archway that's opening right here. Got a little seated bench right here in this area. The only thing that would concern me is whether this is too dark or if I'm worried about this little kind of little pockets that you have in here, that it's not opened up. So that would be the only slight concern.
Does it have glass in that window?
there's glass, and then there's an open archway.
So this glass is open, and then this is an open archway over here.
Right here.
This is an open archway.
That's a concern.
No, okay.
That's a comment. That's good.
And this is just so you know, this is meant to be like a little art niche. So not a bench exactly.
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question?
You may.
This might be, I don't know if this is an older landscape plan, but I was just looking at the shape of this bed, wondering, here at this little tower element for the elevator appears to jet out. Is this accurate?
Yeah, their
Plan?
drawing isn't
Would this
showing
be
the
more
full
accurate with
plan.
green in front of it?
Yes, it actually this bumps out, so there should have been some walls shown here.
I see. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
Clay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple comments. I agree with Gary on this mechanical tower. I was looking at the old drawings here. from the last submittal. And the details changed around the top of it, but the size and the mass of it still seems to be pretty consistent. So I'd be really interested to see how we can make that go away. It's really the only part of this project that I'm struggling with at the moment. I think the changes you've made have been great, and it's definitely improved the building. The only other comment I had was, and we can look at the site plan here, the renderings and the drawings tend to show this is kind of a nice area. And the questions I brought up about the trash enclosure is where I'm having some trouble with this one area, because it seems like this is planned as an area for people to either have some outdoor seating and eating or reading and sort of leisure activity, yet we're going to have people wheeling restaurant trash, which is usually not the most pleasant, through this really nice area to this trash enclosure. So for me, I was looking at, well, is there an alternative path? Does this need to be, can this be shifted somewhere else so that we're not, and I know we have got this big oak tree here, but I'm a bit concerned about the functionality of this being here with the loading over there and this sort of triangle through the nice public outdoor space.
You can respond the next time you're in front of us. We're in comments right now.
So my comment would
Well,
be...
I just don't think we explained the use that well. I mean, that's not what's going to happen, but okay.
Another time.
All right.
My comment would be to consider the location of this trash enclosure and the functionality between the existing dining, the new dining, and this location.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
Great. I'm definitely going to echo the comment about the mechanical well. And what I sense is that the cornice detail needs to go stepping in instead of stepping out. It needs to be reduced in size dramatically and find out what equipment you need and make it only for that size. Also, I don't think you need this roof in front of here, because if these two walls are in the same plane, this can be one element that then makes it even look worse as a bookend. So you've got your job to do as an architect to come up with a better solution. I don't think we're going to back down on that one. Mild comment on the elevation, and this is just what my eye sees, and I would suggest studying just putting 3 little separate arches just below these arches and see what it looks like. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. But somehow this hard edge and this soft edge are in conflict with one another. And if you have the spring line from here to here looks maybe 6 to 9 inches. So if you can pull that down, raise that up or pull these down, you might have a softer look. And it's all just foo-foo. And it's... I just think it's something that can be studied. And those were the only comments I had that were different than other people. So at this point, are you still going to go on to Planning Commission? Okay. So what I'd like to suggest before we make a motion is that we carry forward the first 2 items of the previous minutes. And the first item was the compatibility analysis, and it was A through F. And item 2 was the project mass, bulk, and scale is appropriate for the site. And then anything else we want to add is from that point forward. So, and then we need to tack on a statement about building D. So is someone in a position to make a motion? Do you want me to craft a motion and see if it flies? All right. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the first... this would be item 3, is the applicant is to redesign the mechanical well for the kitchen at the Life Center building. The applicant is to provide additional information about the CMU block walls outside the back of the kitchen, which is used for the cooling, hide the cooling equipment. And the applicant is to provide, is to continue working on the front plaza area, in particular the landscaping adjacent to the front wall. Should I say additional information about the seating wall?
No.
Okay. Leave off the seating wall part. The next item is for building D. The applicant is to, the board finds the improvements to building D satisfactory, and would like the applicant to add the existing chimneys to the elevation. and have the applicant study natural light to the spa area, but let me get the right word. Unless you know it, what is that spot called?
It's the spa.
To the spa entry. Study the natural light to the spa entry. It was mentioned, not that just study it. Because actually, if you have a roof overhang from this far, you're not going to get much natural light into the spot. So I don't know if you want to do a skylight or... And it's your building to think about, but that was one comment he brought up. So with that, those are the comments. Does someone find that something that they can support?
I'll make that motion.
First by Chris, second by Clay. Is there anything else that people would like to add to that or modify?
Mr. Chair, under discussion, there's one item that I came back to a minute ago because I forgot when I was up here. 2.2. This isn't a real deal breaker for me, but I think that the takeoff on this arch is a little high, like the proportion of the columns that come down a little bit and give a little bit of more weight, kind of up in this part of the top of the entry, but it's not a deal breaker for me. And then the only other item that under discussion
Why
was...
don't you write that down as your own note? Because we won't forget, but it does need to be in the minutes for the Planning Commission.
The only other item was just to come back with a clear explanation of the trash in the outdoor plaza.
You want that part of the minutes, or just have them?
It's part of the minutes.
It's part of the minutes, please? Is that okay with the first? All right. Anything else? With that, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And it's an indefinite continuance on to Planning Commission.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good luck and have fun.
Thanks a lot.
You want some of the old drawings back, or you? Nope. All right. Hello. Hello. Next item is item 2. This is 513 Garden Street. We've seen this project before. And Keith, I'm going to have you read the minutes when they're all in front of us. They'll get to us.
I have them if you need them.
Okay.
Okay. These were the comments from last time. The overall site plan is acceptable. Study the relationship of the common open area, the trash recycling area, and the bicycle parking to improve visibility of the open space. Study adding articulation to the south elevation, either with building mass articulation and or with material color to break up the wall at the southern property line. Study a more defined pedestrian entry incorporating ADA ramp access. Study the street elevation of Unit 113 and its relationship with the adjacent street facades. The board is mixed on the use of the bridge element connecting the two buildings. Provide a landscape plan. Include as much planting as possible and canopy trees. Study the use of planting material at the property line fences. Develop articulation of the fence height and material with the adjacent building masses. Study the fenestration and orientation of the units, particularly between units 205, 207, and 208.
All right. We might be passing these minutes around for people to refresh their memory. But with that, if you have your name for the record and your presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Barry Winnick of Winnick Architecture and Design, and I'm here representing the project for Mark Macy, who's the architect who hopefully is listening in from San Francisco via your video feed. And sitting to my right is Alan Macy, who's the founder of the project, and the person behind it. And then to my left is David Black, the landscape architect.
Okay.
So in terms of the presentation, we really went back and studied most of the comments from the board And I've got up on front, the top item is the front elevation, the street elevation along Garden Street. And I think the primary thing to point out on that elevation is that we went and took the idea of making the well, I think if you recall the comments, there was pretty much a consensus that portions of the building matched up rather well, that there was a nice symmetry going on, and there was less a fondness, let's say, for this component that was on the south side. So that was restudied to carry the same proportioned windows that are on the portion that was favored in order to be carried there. The other thing that was studied was to look at the materials a bit more, and I think we spoke about the fact that we were studying whether or not the window fenestration would be wood, painted, stained wood, and so now it's shown as a stained Douglas fir in order to give it a sense of more warmth. The other component that was mentioned in your notes just now is the sense of entry with the bridge, and so that's been maintained very much because I think after going back and exploring it more, we really did like the notion that there was something that one passed through and entered into. We can go into plan, and I can point out some of the other points that
However
were
you
brought
want
up.
to go.
So if we flip the page, a few pages.
Actually, you know what? Let's just quietly go through each one of the pages
Oh,
so
sure.
we know what's on each sheet, and then we'll get to the plan.
Okay, and then also, and although Tony, you actually have this. The one difference is that the at the back of all the other sets, you'll see that there's the actual hard line drawings, and then these are just the colored ones. So we'll just go through the
I
colored
want to
pages.
just go
from
through
the-
this just to
Sure. Street elevation, it's
Context.
just giving you context. Yeah, you get to
This
see
is
it in
across the
scale.
street.
Exactly. And this is looking at the south property line, and
Okay.
or excuse me.
This is the
Sorry, north
side.
property, yeah. And you'll see that we were showing the gridded fence, which is like a black metal rectangular or square grid facing our adjacent neighbor. One of the things we've done here is we've shown a gate potential in the center of it because we've, in our conversations with that neighbor, have found that she would like to be able to participate with us when we have events happening. So the idea is to have the potential to open up our gate between them, and you'll see that we're showing landscaping along this gate, and we're not creating anything to obscure the view between the two sites to keep it as open as possible.
And this line here is the profile of the existing building on that side?
Yeah, well, I guess let's call it an approximate profile because that building actually has an angled top to it.
Oh,
So
okay. Sorry about that.
it's okay. Okay, now looking at the facing south, one of the other comments was to break up the facade of the building in order to have some variation along the facade. So you'll see these two, let's call it wells, let's say, are the slices that run through it. So there's more delineation. And the way that was enabled to be accomplished is that the stairs, which correspond in those two locations in plan, used to come right up to the wall with the cistern on the inside. These are the water collection cisterns. So now they've been placed on the outside and pushed the wall back in order to get that relief.
That's great.
Oh, the other thing, well, it maybe shows best than, you'll see off here at the tail end of the site. Here we have the metal gridded fence, but within it are wood slats in order to create more privacy along those property lines, and then also planting at the rear where that back garden is. The intention here simply is that we don't know who our neighbor will be over time. We know that someday there's a flag-shaped lot adjacent to us. We know that someday they'll develop it. When that happens, perhaps we will then treat this differently. But in the interim, until that happens, we are pretty much creating a visual barrier between us and that site.
Okay.
This is interior elevation, again looking towards the south property line, so you see that same fence over on the
wooden
you're
fence.
right, the wooden fence.
And this is where those water cistern and the stairs.
Exactly. And then something else I want to point
Green
out
wall.
is as you come in from the street, you pass through the first buildings at the front, and then there's the green wall, which corresponds with the bridge that's overhead. So that bridge is back significantly from the edge of the street, and again, it sort of signifies part of that entry sequence that you come into the site.
What's the height on that fence?
Good question. Well, that's going to be 10 feet.
And that would be the same on the opposite side as well?
Yes.
Okay.
I can go check in the set to
Yeah,
verify
we'll
that.
get there later. So then that's inside looking north,
Exactly.
right? And that's that gate that you made reference to.
And now we're at the plan, so that may help out. So there aren't significant changes in the plan in terms of the configuration of the buildings and everything. What you'd see mainly is a little more detail about the planting, and I'll let David explain that more afterwards. I think the main thing to note is you come in, here's where that green wall is, facing south as you come in on that entrance sequence, and then farther back there's a connection in terms of visually around the recycling location has also been covered with green wall. So when you look in, you're not looking at a structure so much as green and planting. And then the area in back behind it, which is meant to be sort of a private garden space and sort of a quiet zone, then has plantings around it. One of the comments that was made by the board was about perhaps making that more of a focal element, but the choice after studying it was to create a green wall and to actually create a quiet zone to give different experiences for the people that will be here on site.
Okay.
Here you can see in plan again where the cisterns are now on the outside and the wall has been stepped in order to create more variation. And the second floor plan, the issue about the light and studies regarding that unit that was over here, there was a concern about that.
Or it doesn't matter?
Yeah, well, that was the unit that was discussed, was about its views out. Although it doesn't show in this plan, I'll have to show you in the elevation. I'll go back.
That was that green wall elevation.
Yeah, but in that green wall there are windows. So
Probably
just-
one more.
probably do that. Right there. So there are windows in that elevation in order to bring light in and to have some view out. There also will probably put in skylights in that unit as well. We studied the possibilities of moving the units around, but we have so little space, and it was determined that the feeling of having the kind of organization that was already established made more sense. Anyway, that unit has that light established, and this one would then get an additional skylight, which probably didn't show.
Skylights underneath the solar panels.
Yeah, no, that needs to be picked up.
Yeah, no.
There's a coordination
Hiccups.
problem. There would be a skylight in there.
Okay.
Then the other thing that we wanted to show is we did take to heart another study. One other point. There was a concern about having a separate sense of entrance coming from the street. And again, we took a look at that.
Pedestrian entrance?
Pedestrian entrance. And this is a very small image, but I'll put it out. Again, the idea really was to go back to more of a European precedent, and actually that one I'm not so excited about, but these two are examples of where the pedestrian entrance as well as the vehicular entrance basically share the same courtyard. And it really is felt that that's how this site is going to be used. This really is the entrance. We'll have that entrance as a main means of convenience, but that truthfully, when people come here, this is really the main entrance, and it will be celebrated and operated that way. There's physical reasons for doing this as well, in that all the landscape and everything at the front of this zone here would all get eaten up if we have to put in a ramp. So we really didn't feel that it served the project the best to have the two separate means of the entrance.
So going back to that, just reading through, how does ADA been addressed?
Well, ADA is able to, this slope that's running through here does handle ADA. So
Okay.
one can roll in, and there's also the ADA parking on site adjacent to that unit. So our point of view is that ADA is addressed.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. And then the other thing is we also took to heart, in fact, some points that you made. And so we've done a little bit of study that you might find this interesting of what would happen if we were to keep the same number of units and try to address the issue of what the our adjacent neighbor, where you were concerned that the height of this building was perhaps impinging on the height of that one, or maybe not in context. So I'm going to go back to the elevation page,
Okay.
and we'll take a look at that. So here's the elevation what we've got as our primary scheme, and here's an alternative. And in this alternative, what we're showing is
Okay, just don't move it once you have it, because the TV camera kind of zooms in on it. That's
okay.
fine. Perfect.
That's fine.
Just
The automated technology. So what you'll see is instead of this being, this is in the primary proposal is a 2-story building, right? So roughly 20 feet, not quite even. It's more like, I guess, 17 feet when you add it all up, would be to have a 1-story building at the foreground, to have it step back, and then have a roofscape there. I've got a plan to put next to it.
you can put that over it if you want.
Well, it might be. Well, I guess if people want to see it online, this sort of gives you. So here you have. There's unit at the second floor and back, but in fact, it's probably your better one to look at. Here's the unit at the second floor and back.
This is the version we're looking at right now?
Correct.
Okay.
This is roof in the front, unit towards the back, which represents that building. And then what would happen is at the third level, back here, we would add another unit. So right now, as you see, we have a 2-story scheme. Essentially what we're doing is we're taking the unit that was here up to the front and then stacking it at the back of the building up on the third level. So that's it right here. I'll just, for your TV camera, that would be the third floor, 1 unit up there.
And so the outdoor living space that was there is now located there.
Precisely.
Okay.
So we're mainly offering this as a point of discussion to show that, we did study and take a look at it, and we're, of course, interested in everyone's comments.
Well, thank you very much.
David?
Landscaping?
I think after looking at Barry's site plan, you're familiar with where the landscape areas are. The plan shown today is pretty consistent with what we showed last week. Our design approach has always been to use native material wherever possible to sort of conserve water and just be consistent with sort of the environmental approach to the building architecture and the project itself. So what we're showing out front here then is not unlike what we showed before. We've got the 2 elm trees that are existing street trees, and then we have sort of a grass palette of material. The Lamus Canyon prints here, the Berkeley sedge grasses in the front, some agaves here, and then deer grass, native deer grass, which get about, probably about 4 feet high or so. And then as you move in, we're still proposing to use the desert willow. It can get 15 or 20 feet. I mean, we planted them in the opportunities that were presented here in terms of these finger planters. We feel like they'll give us good cover, and then the space itself, I think, will have nice enclosure. We have the native California. What did I say? Sorry. Morning glory. Sorry, escaped me. Morning glory on the fencing here. This is the steel fence, and then the is it horizontal board fence, if you will,
right
around the sort of passive area here. So. Under the trees and these finger planters, we've got reed grass, and then there's some minor. Oh, and I should point out too, this is the as you saw, the green wall, and then under the green walls, here under the green wall, and then on the ground plane where the fencing exists, not necessarily in here, but along here, and then around the trash enclosure with the green wall. I wanted to use some sort of inert organic material. And so what we're proposing, because again it doesn't use much water or any, is sort of a native sandstone cobblestone as sort of a ground cover up against the fence, which I thought would be kind of a nice counterpoint to the sort of more industrial look of the building itself. And then we've got some minor little planters around the stairways, and we're proposing, because it's pretty shady in there, the native coral bells. And then in the back, we're using a small oak that we don't use very often, Engelmann oak. It's sort of smaller, and I think a more appropriate scale to this, and understory would be Winifred Gilman salvia, all native. So it's a very clean, broad-stroked approach to the landscape palette.
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. So with that, is that your presentation? Mm-hmm. All right. I will open up public comment. I have 1 speaker slip. Elaine Bassner, if you come on up and sit in that chair. You have
I'll give her
plus or minus 2 minutes. Okay. That chair is fine.
It's Lavasser.
Lavasser, I'm sorry.
My writing's probably terrible. Thanks for taking the time, everyone. And first of all, I want to say that I'm really excited about the project. As a professional artist myself, this sure beats the heck out of the dusty lot we have over there. And I just want to make a couple comments. Number one, the building that we're in at 519 Garden, which is the neighbor to is that the west?
North?
Is that the north? Okay.
North.
That is a new building. It looks old, but it was substantially 95% rebuilt. In 2002, we bought it from the developer. So you don't need to think about it as an antique, although the reason why it was built that way is because at the time they wanted to raise the building and put in something more like you planned here, but the ABR at the time made them restore that building, which financially destroyed the developer, by the way, so I ended up buying it from a man weeping. So it's been torn down basically 95% and everything's new. So, but they had a Mission or Pueblo Viejo thing going on. So he was also required to turn the back building into a Mission style building instead of an open shed parking area. So there's a lot of blood in that property right now, and nobody is going to tear it down. So it's going to be there for a long time. Again, it's only about 8 years old, and I'm very enthusiastic about the opportunity to move that one a living space away and have a garden up here. The front garden that I've had designed by Denise Woolery is exquisite. It would be a beautiful view for these people. It's got a fountain and all kinds of stuff. There's no privacy issues there. And the whole side of this building, there are large windows, and then we have a fence here. And having 2 stories on both of these parcels, I believe will turn that side of our building into a very dark place. And so I would hope that would be, that you would consider having them move that unit. I think having a 3rd unit on the later end will give that area, that neighborhood, a sense of some variation and take away a lot of the sort of flat roofness that is here and there along that street, and have an opportunity to have some, a tower-like space with a bit of a view. So I'm very enthusiastic. I love the front landscaping, and I just wanted to mention while Mr. Black is here that the property line from the back of the office across our parking lot to our warehouse has mature tipu trees and a beautiful mature tabira hedge and these bell tulipy vines, and planting a fence with morning glories obviously is wonderful for one side, but the other side that we may have a little invasion process going on between my and yours. So
We'll have to look at it.
okay, good, thank you.
Thank you very
I
much.
think that's it.
Are there any other speakers? If not, are there any letters that came in?
We had that letter that Gloria forwarded to y'all by email this morning, a letter in support from Nina Dunbar, who is the executive director of the Arts Fund.
Okay.
So I hope you all got that and had a chance to
We
read
got it, and I read it. Thank you. So we'll return it back to the board for questions of the applicant. I don't have any questions. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a couple questions.
You're up.
Let's go ahead and throw the landscape plan up here, I guess. I guess my question here is, what this width is, and if what's the required width you have there for that entry?
Yeah, I'll tell you.
20 feet.
Exactly. 20.
Okay. I guess that'll kind of lead into a comment about possibly, I guess it's a question, is there a possibility to add additional planters? Is this the only spot that could happen? Are these sliding doors here? I mean, what I'm
glass on this side.
It's all, okay.
This is glass
Here
facing each
and
other.
here,
Yeah.
okay. So this is really the only blank wall.
Correct.
Okay. Do you see any problem with adding additional depth here for a planter so that as you look in, it's a little more green? Or is there a reason you left it sort of back and open? You just want that feeling of openness?
Well, I think for fire department access, we pretty much need to maintain that.
You need 20 feet?
Well, yeah. I guess not. I mean, I have to go to research that. Yeah, okay.
Something to study. I'm just trying to get as much green in here as we can, I think. And I think David's done a good job here. So I'll leave that up to your research. Another question I had was regarding the cisterns that are now on the outside. I'm wondering what that material is, or do you know yet?
Yeah, we've done research on it, but we haven't made any determination.
Right.
So,
but obviously it'll be something somewhat aesthetically pleasing, not like a plastic.
Yeah, it's not just
monster.
Yeah, exactly, and it may turn out that it's actually a plastic green monster that's covered by something else that you see. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it'll have some treatment if it isn't something aesthetically pleasing.
Okay, and then one other question was this area right here. Is this a slider also? So you need access. This
Correct.
must be hardscape.
That is a slider. That mirrors this, and it's similar to that.
Okay.
Which is what gives you, if you look at that elevation right there, it gives you that checkerboard effect.
Got it. Okay, great. And then the final question was this trash area. Is that basically a reused storage unit with a green fence on it with vines, or is that an open space?
It's open. It's open to the sky. It was not a storage unit, but it is fencing with, basically it's green wall construction is the idea, is that it would be, live wall.
Okay, so just a fence with vines, basically.
Well, it might be a green wall, which is a different structural consideration than
Right.
a fence, per se. It's
Okay.
much more dense.
Right. Okay.
Basically, it's sort of imagine it as topiary.
All right, that's my questions.
Questions from anybody else? Mr. Chair. Keith?
Barry, I assume that the colors that are represented here are kind of a representative of the direction that you guys are going with materials, or...
I'd like to say that they may be a little bit of artistic license on my part. I think it gives a flavor of where it's going, but I don't think I'd want to say that, we're ready to hold up Pantone colors to it.
It's indicative of kind of the direction.
Yeah, it's meant to have an earthen warmth to it.
I actually had one question that I forgot about. Not that it's a concern, but there's an existing tree that's in the property. Does that have to go through the street tree committee because that's within the first 20 feet? And has that been done? Or
Yeah.
Okay. And would they require you to replace it with a certain number of trees, and because you're doing trees in the parking lot, they'll see that as an equivalent?
Probably. I mean, it's not a native. It's pine, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we did raise that originally during the PRT process that we went through, and it was not identified as being a important tree or a contentious issue.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We will process that.
Okay. No other questions? We'll move on to...
I actually had some questions. Easy.
You're hiding over there.
Had a couple of questions. The fire-rated wall system, what is that material that you're using for that?
There were two that we explored and that we showed last time, and I think the one that we liked the better was it's almost like a ceramic cementitious type material. So it's basically
Is that gonna stand independent from the containers? Is that your?
no, it's attached to the containers.
It'll be physically attached to the container.
Correct.
And will it be the same height of it, or
Yeah.
will it go beyond it? Will it be in a parapet type situation, or how is that?
We still have some detailing to do. The intention is for it to align with the same height as the containers. There may, in fact, be a little bit of a parapet of 4 inches or something once we figure out how to waterproof and detail it.
Okay. I'm looking at page A4.1. It's an alternate, one of the alternates that you have.
Can you give me a
Correct.
second?
Yeah.
Let's find what sheet that
You're
is.
not going to have it. Tony, no, I do need your one extra
Can I just-
set.
Let me just borrow
okay, Clay's got it. Thanks.
sheet A 4.1.
Right.
Okay.
Which shows the 3-story scheme.
Which is the 3-story scheme, and I'm looking at the northwest elevation. And I was wondering where the 1-story element is on that. Did you miss that on there, or? This is looking at other renderings. There seems like there's a garden roof and a
there should be a
railing
notch
around
right
the,
here.
Yeah.
around the outside of
And a
it.
railing right
Thank
there.
you, Clay. Yeah, we did miss it.
Okay. So there is would that setback, if I am looking at it at the northwest elevation, would that garden roof, is that going to come back 20 feet? Is that going to come back 40 feet? What,
I think
what
it's
type of
20.
seed trains are you using?
I think in that case it's a 20, but I don't want to be misleading here. 24 feet is the step back in that case.
Can you actually put, what sheet is that?
That's a 2.3 alternate.
What I'm just looking at is, this is a solid wall,
Correct.
and so that railing would go to this point?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, and you'll see that's 24 feet.
Okay.
And then on either elevations, on the southeast elevation and the northwest elevation, on both on both the alternative and the proposed, there's no fenestration on either side of those of the buildings. The only proposal is the inset of the wells. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? And if not, let's just jump to comments. Who would like to go first?
Mr. Chair, I still like this project. I think the changes that have been made to the street elevation is definitely an improvement from before, and I'm curious to see as this develops a little bit further what might come out of it. But I like the project. I like the direction. I think the changes to the south elevation work well. I might be interested in seeing some way of breaking up. Maybe we go to
What
the
south elevation did you refer to?
The
guess
same
it
one
would
that
be
Gary
south.
was just asking about.
Oh, with
east
the-
elevation.
It would be this with the surstones. This one.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
I think that these changes are are really nice. I think you need to work out how you're going to access these if you need to maintain them
Mm-hmm.
from the other side. I'm sure that'll happen as you develop it. One thought I was having about this wall here is I like the proposal. I was wondering if maybe there were opportunities to sort of break it up so it didn't look like a mass wall, that maybe it had some sections that didn't have any siding in it, so you had a little bit of transparency through there with some vegetation. It might be an interesting idea. For me, I wanted to look at this because I understand the neighbor's comments, and I was looking at the site plan. I feel that this is very much not as successful of an elevation when you take that front unit off. But I was looking at the site plan. If we can go to that. We have, is that?
There you go.
That's fine.
No, that was a good one.
Is that the upper level?
Well, this was the upper level. If that's what he wants to look at.
It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
One of the things I noticed is that north is this way. So as the sun rises, we all know, rises over here and kind of comes around like this. So the most
matter.
exposure that this building's going to receive is going to be here, and then around like this in the afternoon is when it starts to drop down. So as I look at this, I think, well, if you're going to take a unit out, it probably wants to be here as opposed to here, which would actually keep the nice, what I think, in my opinion, the nice facade along the street and the sort of the balance that's there, but also maintain the light for that building. And in saying that, I'm also not that excited about just shoving another unit up on top of here either. So I guess my direction would be, if we're going to look at taking one of these units out, I think it should be the rear one, because it would probably have the most benefit on this structure. But again, I'm not that excited about that third-story piece here and just the functionality and what it actually does to the. It's hard to see in this design, but to the actual mass of the building. But in general, I'm very supportive of the project. I think it's really nice and excited to see it happen.
Anybody else? Any order? Keith.
Look at the site plan. I echo Clay's comments. I think this is really going to be a great project, and I'm supportive of it. I think regarding the massing, I would tend to go with the original scheme of the 2 stories at the street. I think that's more successful architecturally than having the 3rd story kind of isolated somewhere. The adjacent structure, although I'm sympathetic with the neighbors' concerns, it is a commercial building. We're talking a height difference here of, when you consider the pitched roof of the neighbor, of half a story. So I think in a commercial zone, that kind of variation is justified, and really you want to have that kind of variation, I think, in the streetscape. So that's kind of my vote on that. And I think to weigh in on the bridge, which we were kind of non-committal on last time, I think the bridge is a good move architecturally, just to add that sense of entry to the building in kind of a subtle way, since it's so far set back. On the site planning, I'm not quite convinced about having the ADA access with the kind of move and pedestrians combined with the auto access, only because I think the devil's sort of in the details, and when we really get down to all the code requirements of all our visual warning strips and our little bumps and everything, that that could get pretty messy real fast. So you're going to have to convince me on that with some studies of the paving and how that really works, so that we don't end up with yellow Sensi dots all over the place.
Okay, that's fair.
So convince me on that one.
Okay.
I'm also not
Okay.
totally convinced about the trash enclosure either. I mean, I'm looking at it, and I understand what you're trying to do, and I don't have I think the idea of the sort of the green object's fine, but I think it's just inefficient, and you're using up a lot of real estate that maybe could be used better for better uses if you set your imaginations to the layout as far as efficiency, and I know you guys could. So that's sort of my comment there. I'm not, again, totally convinced there. I like the moves along the south property line. I like the fence proposal here, maybe to kind of tie in with Clay's suggestion of some variation in this kind of woven wood wall. Perhaps as you develop the materials and color palette, you could look at some subtle variation in the panels to add another dimension. I think it could use just another level of variation there to make it more successful. I agree with Clay. I think the next iteration of the street facade is more successful than we saw last time. I'm still also not totally convinced about the windows for this unit here. I forget the number. It's either 205 or 208, but I mean, this guy's really kind of looking at a blank wall for the most part. So I think if you do introduce this idea of the skylight at the back, that it should be a pretty substantial one, because I think he's pretty much kind of in a light well.
It's 205.
205. Okay. But yeah, I think it's definitely progressing nicely. I would like to see a more detailed study of the paving throughout the project, just because it is such a kind of dominant element, and again, with the eye to, like Chris was saying, getting as much green in there, and just what the materials are and everything on that. So I think that's it. I really like it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Either one of you.
Okay. Sure. I I do like the project, but I do have several concerns still. And I think one of the main concerns that I have is, of course, the southeast elevation and the west elevation. Particularly this unit and this unit here. Let's see if I'm kind of looking at different plans here.
Let's go back to these, if you don't mind, those CAD ones.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Thank you. And you want to
I think when we look at these corners right here and how blank and harsh they are next to the existing building that's there, it's not very human scale. You come up to it, it's one element of materiality, and it's a very harsh corner that you will be seeing on both directions when you're driving down. And I think that element is something that if it was a regular building or a building that we were having, we would say that it needs something. And I think that in these particular instances, fenestration is needed. And you were saying that you want to build it, we're going to put these in, and what happens in the future, we can change things. What happens into the future? That is regarding the fence. But you were open to that matter, and I would like you to keep an open mind towards the manner of fenestration of the same thing. The next thing I want to talk about is the fence.
Can I share a code thing?
You can wait till
Okay.
after I'm done. The next thing I want to talk about is the fence. And I think the fence I just think it's too tall. And when you have an opening, let's see if we go to the site plan.
If you want to say it's this one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that to it?
When we have I was hoping to have the neighboring property, but in the neighboring property right here, on both sides we have, it's open, and one of the comments you made was that you were going to open up a fence in between it, and that would be this one
That's
right
that
here.
gate.
And what we have is we have a section right here that's open, and we have some openness, a little bit of openness on this side. But what we put up is we put up this big 10-foot wall, and I really feel like it's enclosing the entire place, and I think the height of it is not a human scale at all, especially if you have the idea of having interactions and things going on in this area for the public. I feel like this area should drop down in height and be more inviting and be more human scale. I'm going to agree with the ADA access. I really think that we need some type of pedestrian access that comes in here that tells us that this is the entrance to the building. It's not a driveway. It's something that you can feel safe to go into, and I think that's an important method. As far as these wells are concerned, I would like to see those detailed out. If they are going to be plastic tanks, we want to see what they're going to look like. But
We won't be looking at plastic tanks. But, yeah.
or if they're going to be, or they're going to be some concrete around them, like you have on the front of the building, or something. We were going to want to see what those look like, so we can assess that. I'm not comfortable about the 3-story element, and myself, I'm not comfortable about the bridge element. Thanks.
You're up.
I don't really have too much to add. I think there were a lot of good comments from all three guys, and I agree with just about all of them.
Let's go to the landscape.
Sure. The one, I understand the need for the ADA access, and I do worry about trying to incorporate it over here and losing a lot of this planting, like you had mentioned originally. And I think because this is such a heavy addition, that I think the more planting the better around and in front of this building. So I agree it could get a little cluttered over here, but I think you should just study what that's going to look like with all the requirements for the ADA. Beyond that, I agree with Gary's comment about the height of the fence. I'm wondering if there was a reason it was at 10 feet, or if it doesn't seem like it would necessarily need to be that tall, so maybe some explanation as to why it's at 10 feet. And as far as the options go, I kind of liked taking this and putting it up over here, but the staircase got much too complex and busy. So to me, studying moving that one instead is a possibility, but I'm going to leave that up to the architects here on the board. I would like to find a way. Maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like there could be more planting as you look down this big corridor here, and this seems like an opportunity, at least to get maybe a 2 or 3 foot bed in there. I don't know what the fire department requirements will be, but again, just to green up as much as we can in little pockets here and there, because basically what you do is you look straight down this to the corner of a building, and these trees might overhang a little bit. You're not going to see much planting at all as you look right straight down this corridor. Also, Keith had mentioned this trash and recycling area. I know you want to keep it as kind of a quiet area, but I think this could at least open up a little bit here so that it's not such a pinched point. I was, looking at, could the trash go here with a green wall instead, so you're already closer. But again, you want to, create that privacy back there, which is understandable, as long as you're not smelling it too much. So beyond that, I agree with what the rest of the board has said. I'll leave my comments at that.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for studying the option, because I was the only one who dissented. And I strongly believe that we should do something here at the second floor and move this back, and I appreciate that design scheme. I actually went to their business and I stood in their courtyard and I actually took a photograph looking this direction, and I imagined what it would be like to have a 2-story element right here. And I understand that this is commercial, but I also recognize the fact that this is an existing building. It is here, and we need to work with the existing infrastructure. I don't have a concern like on this side, like Gary says, because eventually some building's going to come here. But while it's not there, you get to hold this corner. But on this side, there needs to be some harmonious relationship. There just can't be you're there and I'm here, and so I appreciate the fact that it moved up here. I don't have a problem with it being 3 stories. In fact, that's fabulous. This is where your visiting artist studio is, because it has the best view of the ocean, and it has the most windows. I mean, it's just great. And if you have too much PV, then you can give them another outdoor living space up on the 3rd floor. So the comments about the ADA access and everything, I agree with all the other people's comments. But I'm going to hold out on reducing the first floor element, the second story element at the front, and not do anything in the back like Clay was suggesting, because we're not doing it for the solar aspect. We're doing it for massing in relationship to an existing building. So the only reason why this structure was being moved from this unit from this point to this point was to have a softened edge next to an existing building that's going to be around, whether it's 5 years or another 25 years. The fact is that we're going to have to be living with this relationship, and we need to show how there was some design thought put to it, on some sensitivity. So thank you very much for that exercise. So with that, we need to give them some direction, and at this point, it's comments only. I didn't even check that part out. Environmental assessment. What are you missing for your environmental assessment?
We haven't gone and filed our DART yet. So,
Okay.
But our intention having come here is really we wanted to go with a real clear point of view of where the design is going. So we make our DART application. The project then comes back for conceptual final and goes rather smoothly.
So, in some respects, you've gotten a mixed message. I'm just the acting chair, but 2 people are sort of saying maybe open this corner up. 1 or 2 people are saying I like having this here, and then 1 person said no 3 stories. So now you've got a really big mixed message on what to do. And then we're missing 2 members, and some people are completely fine with the 2-story straight up and down. Elevation-wise, I can't say it hurts or helps it. I'm not looking at the elevation. I'm looking at the actual 3-dimensional massing and how it marries up. It's your project and how you want to proceed and what direction, because you now had 2 or 3 different suggestions.
Yeah.
In the sense, do you want to come back here in the next time, keeping it the way you had it with the 2-story, because that's what you want? That's your choice. If you want to go with the 3-story up here, you can do that. If you want to come back with another alternate solution, moving this unit up to here.
Yeah, I mean, I can just tell you my own personal feeling. I think the building is most successful being, after doing the studies, I actually agree with Clay and Keith's assessment that it's a more successful elevation, that the facade is better, and that it's a two-story building, which are low 2 stories. Each one is, basically 8'10" each, so we're not even 20 feet next to a 1.5-story building. I don't think it's so out of scale. So I think that if I were living next door, I'd be more concerned about the light than its street presence. So I do think that the idea of perhaps taking that other unit and moving it to the 3rd floor at the back has the most logic in terms of what it will do for the adjacent neighbor, that it would give them more light and air. It would still give this building its presence at the street. I didn't hear tremendous objections to the thought of a 3rd-story building because it's set back far enough. So I think that would work. And I think that actually tries to address pretty much all the concerns. I know the one concern you mentioned is left aside a little bit, but I think that one has the nicest approach. And I just wanted to answer one other little thing, if I can, since you've given me the note. Is part of the reason why we don't show fenestration in this corner is that we're on a property line.
Yeah.
And so it's building to code, fire issues. Otherwise, we would, wholeheartedly put fenestration there. I couldn't agree more in honesty, but we have that restriction.
So with that, hearing how you are framing the presentation, is there someone who wants to make a motion, and it would be an indefinite continuance back to full board?
Thank you.
I'll take a stab.
Good job, Mr. Keith.
So this is a definite continuance back to full board with the following comments. The board is mixed on the variation in the massing between the 1-story at the north property line and the addition of the 3rd story, and I guess relies on the applicant's judgment to make that call. The applicant is to study the property line walls with an eye for incorporating additional scale and detail, particularly at the more visible corners, and to study possible variations in the wood fence portion as well as the fence heights. Study the overall paving design of the project, in particular the incorporation and resolution of the ADA access at the drive-through. Provide more information and or details of the cistern materials and detailing, and study opportunities for incorporating additional planting throughout the project, but in particular in the drive areas. And several board members suggested further study on the trash enclosure configuration, again to incorporate more planting and open up the project, or open up that end of the project visually.
Great. Is there someone who wants to second that?
Mr. Chair, I'll second it.
Okay, anything else you want to add?
Under discussion, related to this ADA thing, because I just did this on a project, what's going to be required is a dedicated path and 2 feet of truncated domes. So when you start adding that into here, you have to have a truncated domes when you have a pedestrian path next to a walkway. I'm sorry, next to a driveway.
Right.
So I think you'll start to eat into your 20 feet pretty quickly. So the idea of and this comment wasn't in your notes, this is why I'm going to bring it up. I think you probably need to look at doing an ADA access point through here. And I was looking at this over there. It looked programmatically, if you flip this, you flip that, you could have a ramp. You could ramp up, no steps, and probably get back to here without too much trouble.
Yeah, I think you're
depending on
right.
what your grade issues are. The other thing related to ADA, I think this will probably come up in plan check, but these probably need to be over here, the ADA parking, because of their proximity to the unit. So I would just do a little site planning once over with the ADA and make sure that you got those covered.
Okay, thanks.
I had one comment under discussion for the bridge. I don't think we should do a straw poll because we're missing 2 members, but I personally don't have a problem with the bridge, and if I'm hearing right, only one person had a problem with the bridge. And I just so that you know, as going forward, at least the majority of the people here were fine with the bridge elements. And I was wondering, do you want to put something in the minutes or the motion about that, or no need?
Well, let's go ahead and then just to kind of maybe simplify Clay's comments, study the incorporation of a separate ADA pedestrian access. And then that the board is, overall, the board is comfortable with the bridge element. Be the last comment.
Yeah. Anything else for the motion? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm actually going to be opposed just because I'm going to hold out just for one story in the front. That's the only way I'll support the project. So with that, there's 4-1.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm only acting chair. This week, I'm only
week.
acting chair.
Okay.
And a chair is only one vote. So with that, let's move on to item 3, which is 22 North Calle Cesar Chavez. I apologize. My goodness gracious, we're 40 minutes late.
Those are mine and these are yours.
How'd that happen?
Great, thank you.
Oh, man. Usually I'm a tough guy.
Okay. Thank y'all. Take care.
Actually, that's with the record.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Sorry we're running late.
No problems.
We'll speed it up on you.
No
How's that?
problem.
This is a new item, so I'll read the project description. This is a proposal for a new 2,226 square foot canopy over 2 existing gasoline pump islands. Photovoltaic panels are being proposed on the canopy. So if I have your name for the record and your little microphone, and you may start your presentation.
My name is Keith Slocum. I'm with B&T Service Station Contractors. This is Ken Olson, president of McCormick's Oil.
Great.
The site right now has an existing fuel station and also a loading rack where they provide fueling for cardlock operations, not for retail to the general public, but for in an industrial area to commercial clients. They also load their own fuel trucks and then use those trucks to distribute them to their wholesale customers. The site has an existing building on it that you see. It's a 900 square foot office building.
Which is right there.
And it has above ground fuel tanks in the back. There is some fencing to separate the yard from the retail area. And there are existing underground fuel tanks that are also shown on your site plan. Again, those are underground out in front. The site's neighbored in an area of heavily industrial parcels around it. This is a project where we're proposing to add canopy, metal service station canopy. Elevations are included on the second page. It's 53 feet wide, and that's wide as you approach the fuel islands, not from the street view. 53 feet wide by 42 foot long. The 42 foot would be along Calle Cesar Chavez. It would be a metal structure. It'd have 10-inch square steel columns, 4 of them, and the top of it would be metal panels, traditional gas station canopy. The solar panels would be recessed within the metal facade of the canopy. The structure is supported by purlins and beams above a metal deck. So when you're standing underneath it and you look up, you see the metal deck as in a normal gas station canopy. They'll have lights. They'll be fully recessed lights. And The metal panels will be up top, as will the superstructure, so that they won't be visible to the public.
Okay, let's see what's on this sheet. Anything? Canopy, drainage, and the lighting. This is the recessed lights. Okay.
Yes, the lighting's fully recessed, and it's LED technology, so it'll make the it'll be energy efficient. The goal of the project is twofold. Number one is to keep rainwater from turning into tainted stormwater. Of course, in a normal fuel station, you have your rainwater is captured by the canopy and then carried through gutters and downspouts out beyond the canopy. In this case, when there's no canopy, it hits the fuel islands. Customers often will, as they're fueling, they'll top off their vehicles. From time to time, fuel is spilled. And although best efforts are made to contain that, once it hits the ground, it can be absorbed into the concrete and the water can draw it back out. So a canopy is a best practice to keep that from happening. The other one is to go ahead and have a platform to contain the solar panels to offset the electrical expenses at the site. And
just to quickly go through the colors, this blue is going to be this canopy. This silver gray is the post, and the white is the underside.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that concludes our presentation.
Cool. Is there anybody from the public wishing to speak on this project? Seeing nobody, I'll ask staff, are there any letters? No letters. So I'll return it back to the board for questions of the applicant. Anybody?
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
One quick one. What's our height here just to the underside? And
15 feet.
Okay. Thank you.
Gary?
Just looking at one of your details that you have on here, I think it's on the last page. And it appears that the column has a base on it. Looks like it comes up about 4 feet, 2 feet. What is that base? Is there material around there? Is that
talking about this little bump out that happens right here?
No, that's there isn't a bump out that's there. It's just the metal. It's the painted metal canopy pole going up.
So the column is only going to be the 12 by 12 column, and there's not going to be a skirt or a base, or it's not going to be sided with other material.
Correct.
Well, actually, we'll have you maybe get back with additional information, because it definitely shows a little bump here.
It shows some material on the out. It shows a casing around the outside of the.
That's the pump in front of the column.
That's the pump in front of the column.
Sorry.
Maybe for clarity, that should be clarified a little bit, because I could see on that.
What page are you on, Paul? Go to the
I'm
last
on
page.
I'm on it.
It's clarified on page
There
2,
we
but
go.
on page 3.
Look at this last page up here, the detail on that. It looks like the columns are cladded. You can see the steel column in the center, and then it's cladded on the outside. There's a little bit of base. It's not that it's a deal breaker or a big deal. I just want to know what it was.
All right. But just to clarify, from your perspective, this is the column straight up and down with no skirt on it.
That's correct. That was the intent.
All right, gotcha. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, I have one question. This drawing I'm looking at, I don't have the exact set there. So what is the depth? It says elevation 18 feet, clearance 15 feet. So is the canopy edge 3 feet
That's
in
correct.
height? Is there any signage proposed for that?
Not at this time, no.
I have a question actually for staff. Was there anything in the sign violations for that? Okay. What I remember, and maybe there was a complaint that was made at a sign committee meeting about some kind of raised boxcar or something like that has your name on it, and someone was asking, was there a sign permit for that, for the graphics? And if I can have staff look into that, because I know that was mentioned, and maybe the ball was dropped.
Mr. Chair, I just checked. We have a computer here now, and there's 3 parcels associated with this address. I checked those 3 parcels, but I can look further than that. I didn't see any enforcement at all on
Okay.
these 3 parcels.
All right.
So just to clarify, it's basically going to be a plain blue stripe all the way around 3 foot with no wording or signage of any kind? Is that
Yeah, it won't be a stripe. It'll just be a plain blue fascia.
right? Okay. And it looks like you have no plans to upgrade any landscaping at this time in accordance with this project. Is that right?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
All right. Is there any other discussion? I will go to comments. No comments?
Mr. Chair, I'll jump in. I guess my only comment is I like the environmental benefits of this. I guess my only comment would be having the entire fascia that blue might be a little much, particularly with the visibility from the 101. So I would encourage you guys to study maybe an alternate way to incorporate that blue that maybe is a little more less all-encompassing, let's just say. That's my only comment.
Okay. Anybody else? I actually concur exactly with where he's going with that.
Yeah, I agree as well. I'm a little concerned about the views up to the mountains. I mean, it's a nice big wide open area right now, and it's a very industrial zone, like you said. So there's not much we can say about that. But it would be nice. It's also very concrete dominated in this area. It looks like you have an asphalt sidewalk here. As a gesture to the city, it'd be nice to just incorporate even a strip of landscaping in front there, just so we don't have this entire huge expanse of concrete. We're not going to require that, of course, but just as a recommendation for the city to add some greenery in that zone. And I think that's it for my comments.
Gary?
Yeah, a few comments. I do like all the environmental aspects of it, the LED lights, the solar panels, the shielding of the site itself. So those are all positive. Things. The only thing I'm concerned with, there's 2 things I'm concerned with. One is, of course, the blue strip all the way around. The other is that this is rather a very plain element that we're proposing.
Is your mic on?
And I think that it deserves a little bit more architecture. And I would say that the columns should have plinths on them that are made out of stone or something that's going to make it a little bit more, a little more upgraded from what it is proposed. This is an industrial area, but by adding this canopy top and being so close to the freeway, you may be inviting more clients, or that may be the direction that this is going. So I think that the columns should be a little bit more detailed, as they are in a lot of service stations, and that's the direction I would propose that it goes to, that we mute the blue into a white and that we detail the columns out.
Okay. I'll make my 2 cents. Mildly, I agree with Gary in the sense of adding a little more fenestration just because it makes it look prettier. If it's a simple little bump out, whether it's stone or brick or metal or something, it just makes it look nicer, and we all like things that look nicer. It doesn't have to be high-end like they're doing on, is it Cliff Drive? They're building a brand-new gas station across the street from Albertsons. I don't think that's what we want here. So that's not what it is. But just a little bit of a nicety. As for the landscaping that Chris was making reference, I mean, this is not let's make a deal or something, but I think if there's no street trees along the sidewalk and there's opportunity, or there's wells, I think a street trees here would be more beneficial than adding 12 or 24 inches of landscaping on the ground on your property, because then you have to maintain it, and eventually the street trees grow up and form canopies, and there's some on the other side of the building already based upon this aerial photograph. So just to create a better environment, which is what our board is all about, I would advocate a couple more one or two street trees instead of trying to provide some landscaping, because then I know maintenance is going to be an issue and it's not going to exist and it's going to become dirt. So, but it's a pretty straightforward project.
And I'll just add to that, and I think that's a good idea, adding trees, even if you had one on each side, that would just help to cut down on how imposing that new canopy is, So again, not a requirement, but suggestion.
So does someone want to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a simple motion fitting for the project. This is a indefinite continuance back to full board, if that's okay with you as far as timing, with the following comments. Study an alternate color variation, an alternate color scheme that minimizes the use of the blue color, if not eliminates it entirely. Study adding some minor articulation to the vertical, or the canopy columns, with an eye probably with something towards the base. And then 3, the applicant's encouraged to incorporate some form of additional landscaping on the site, in particular the possibility of additional street trees. That's it.
Is there someone who wants to second that? Second. I have a question for either the applicant or for staff. Is your next move, do you have to go to Planning Commission for this, or Staff Hearing Officer? It says coastal review.
That's, that's true. I don't know. It's probably going to be some sort of exemption or exclusion.
So can the board give this project preliminary approval tonight, or?
No, we haven't done the environmental assessment.
Okay. So my comment just to the applicant is don't come back to the board until you're ready to get preliminary approval, or whatever the city calls it. So that's just for your own information.
So, Mr. Chair, if the board feels strongly about the landscaping, you can require it.
At this point, I think we would strongly encourage it and let it be at that. I mean, we understand that it's an upgrade, it's an environmental upgrade, but like Chris said, having 2 street trees here minimizes the imposement of the extra height here, relates to the other trees. But it's good for the applicant to think about it, and come back with what they would like to do for our town. So is there any more discussion?
I would just say that 3 would be better.
Boy, now he won't sleep at me.
When it comes to plants, odd numbers are typically more desirable.
And it all depends on the breakups in the side.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So with that, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're on to item 4. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So what are those? That'll block that solar. Oh, yeah. Item 4 is 120 South Hope Avenue. We've seen this project before, and final approval is requested. Sorry, we're running 30 minutes late.
You have the drawings here.
Yes, we should. It's angle. You can just give us the name for the record.
My name is Richard Benson, with Benson and Bull Architects.
Okay.
We've had 2 previous meetings on this project, and I think we're pretty close to consensus the last time around. I think most of the comments focused on the canopy over the angle at our last meeting.
I'll just read the 2 comments. One of them is to study lowering the canopy structure if feasible, and number 2 was provide all details, materials, and colors. And so that's that. You're on.
We actually submitted a complete color and material board with the last meeting. Those colors are not changed from that. I've got a colored elevation, and those colors are reflected in the working drawings that we've
I think what we were looking for was the 8.5 by 11 thing that goes in the actual project binder. Did you give like the actual building materials glued to a board?
Yes, we did.
Okay. If staff's okay with it, then we're fine with it.
There are very few colors involved in this. And in fact, on the Chicos, we're using some of the existing colors on the Chicos. I've got photographs of that if you'd like to see it. So.
Okay. So how did you address the canopy?
We were not able to lower it, and we got structural input and also client input, and we've lowered it. In fact, it's just a few inches to the top of the storefront that's existing. So it's at 14 feet. The typical canopy at La Cumbre is at 15 feet, so slightly lower, but not lowered short of taking out some of the storefront that's in place. And our decision was to leave the storefront in place, add the canopy up above, lower it as much as possible, and then deal with the details that came to the ground. In working with the structural engineer, actually turned out to be a little bit more than we expected with the structure because of having to tie it to the ground rather than support it off the existing structure, which is a requirement of the storefront design criteria at La Cumbre. And with that, we also had wind upload to deal with, so the cables, we actually ended up adding cables in order to support it and then tying it back somewhat to the existing structure beyond. So with all of that, and then also creating drainage for the canopy itself, which came down through the space, we made some modifications to where the storefront related to the canopy, but we could not lower it more than a couple of inches. And that was not presented as an absolute in any event.
Okay. Let me find the overall elevation. Was it on this sheet? That's the site plan.
It's the next sheet.
Okay. Anything else you want to go over?
Not really. At one point, I think in these elevations, we show a neutral strip on either side, and I think it's identified as plaster. But there's an existing neutral strip actually in between the Louis Vuitton and the Chico's in this location. And the intent really was to match that, and it in fact will be a flat metal strip that allows the cornice to return into that on the ends. And it's shown here just as smooth plaster. It could be plaster, but we'll probably want to contrast it in color so that the profile of the cornice up above stands out against that.
Cool. If that's all, then I'll open up public comment. You got some pictures or no need?
These are just existing pictures.
I'll open up public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to address the board? Seeing nobody, are there any letters? There are no letters. So now I return it back to the board for questions of the applicant.
Mr. Chair.
Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I missed the last review, so I'm just curious. We have higher clear story or transom windows here than over here. Was there a structural reason for that? Is that what you were talking about, or was there something?
It's actually an existing condition.
So this is an existing head here, an existing head here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We didn't alter the storefront, and essentially what we did is we put the canopy at this line here. And you can see this storefront is slightly lower than it is out here. So what we were trying to do is keep this intact. And in our first presentation, we had suggested, because Angle wanted something more contemporary, such as what was seen over here, but that wasn't received well, and we were told that a more traditional approach, and we left the center glazed storefront in place instead. And then rather than replace that, it's already there, so our last pass, we decided to leave the storefront in place below and then just add the canopy up above, right at that line.
So correct me if I'm wrong. This opening is right here,
That's correct.
and this opening is right here.
Right.
And this is higher than that?
No, that's exactly equal. And that's the bottom of the canopy. Back beyond this, it drops down at the storefront line. This is recessed about 4 feet.
So this is actually pushed back.
That's all pushed back.
That's what I wasn't getting.
Yeah, including this piece right here, which is also in the line of the storefront, which is back. So this line is consistent all the way across.
Do you have
This
like
is
a
where it
reflective
breaks back.
ceiling plan of kind of that area?
We do.
might show it the best.
Well, actually, we've got a roof plane in this section. This is the recessed area here. And this is the lower storefront here that you see. And the storefront actually comes up to this line beyond.
Questions from anybody else? Let's go into comments. Any comments? No comments. Then let's just.
I'll give you. I think it looks great. I think you did a good job. Ideally, we wanted it a little lower, but I can see that it's a problem to do that, and I think the project looks good. It's ready to move forward.
Okay. Anybody else?
I concur.
Cool. I'd say I find comments. I mean, no more comments. A motion.
Mr. Chair, I move for final approval as.
Great.
I'll second.
Second. Any other discussion? We'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hope you get more work out there. Pleasure
good.
working for you.
Thank you.
Working with The door just opened. Are you for item 6, 226?
Yes.
All right. We're going to move on to the next item. This is going to be, I should actually announce for the record that item 5, which is 826 Delavina Street, will be heard after item 6 if they show up. So moving on, this is a new item, so I'll read the project description. It is 226 South Voluntero Street. It is a proposal for a new 3-story, 2,439 square foot single residential unit with an attached 327 square foot one-car garage and a new 478 square foot two-car garage at the rear of a site currently developed with 2 detached single residential units. This is for comments only. Project requires environmental assessment. If I have your name for the record and go over some site photos.
Yes, hello, my name is Justin Van Mullum. I'm with On Design Architects. And let me start with, I guess, kind of letting you know where the project is. So here's the freeway, and then we have South Voluntario, and India Muerto is right in this location. So our site is right here. It's a very deep lot, as you can see. This is 50 feet, and I believe this is 200. I'd have to look at the site plan, over 200. So what we'd like to do from here, keep the existing house as it is. There's some things that need to be removed that we can't find permits for that are in this location. Create the parking, and then create a garage, a detached garage in this location here, and then just a single story. And then in this area, there's a proposed 3rd story, and then these are 2 stories. You can see that the neighborhood, this is a kind of a massive apartment project, and so it's that 3rd story would be heavily screened not only by the existing 2 stories. It's about 20 feet tall, flat roof, and then this is all 2-story here, and then more 2 stories here and here. So it's pretty dense, the neighborhood. We didn't want to do 2 stories in this location. Instead, we'd like to propose a 3rd story back here. And here are some of the...
So, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I just clarify? Is this a proposal for a new 3-story or for a new 3rd story on an existing 2-story?
I'm sorry, it's a whole new building.
Okay.
And you can see that here's a 1-story building existing, a 1-story building existing, and then this has a carport in it and some type of storage area back here.
So there's no existing building. currently. on
Well,
that
I mean,
location.
this is what's existing.
Okay.
So, yes, not quite sure on the style of that. So this kind of gives you an idea of what's happening around the site. There, luckily, even with the vegetation that we're going to remove, which is in the center mostly, very large avocados and orange trees, there is Pittosporum along this side that was planted as a hedge that's 20 feet in this area, and in this area right here about 26 feet tall. We plan to keep all of that, and then there's the same kind of along this side. You can see that that mature vegetation kind of right in this area here. This is a picture of it on this opposite side right here, and then here it is again from all the way through, all the way through. So it is a massive hedge, and it can easily be cut down on the side, but it's not really overhanging much because mostly it's the avocado and the oranges that are taking up the area. So, kind of, do you have any questions on that? Moving forward. So here's our existing. There's a bunch of trees in this location that we'll be saving, and a bunch of trees in this location that we'll be saving, and we'll be cutting down the avocados and the oranges I talked about, and existing units. And so we're proposing the unit here with a one-car garage and then the two-car garage in this area. And there's elevations for the one-car garage, and then
No, the elevations for the two-car garage.
I'm sorry, yes, for the two-car garage. And then this just basically shows how we're going to meet our open space requirements. Actually, this was what was submitted, but I've got a color version of that.
Okay, let's go for that.
So the roof pitch is 7 and 12, and the you can see here we've got right here we've got the solar ordinance on this side. So we kind of did a split pitch, and then we brought it back up, and so we have 8-foot plates on the top floor, and then they kind of go down a little lower in this area, and the third story is only right about here. It stacks on that garage wall, so that's where the third story is located. And then we have just kind of tried to break up the mass with some vertical boarding and some horizontal. And we have just a comp shingle roof. The third story is just right up here. And this is an interesting neighborhood, and this is going to be a rental product, obviously. But what we're trying to do is, there's not a lot of rental products out there that are for big families or kind of families that are also taking care of in-laws and things like that. So that's what we're kind of going for, and that's why we proposed the third story. But tried to make it as easy as possible to build, stacking the bathrooms, and nothing's too lavish. It's the bedrooms. Some bedrooms are relatively small, and you can see the third story would be mostly seen from that one elevation where you have the existing big blocky buildings, which is this elevation right here. And so you can see all that mature. I measured the this is about 20 feet right here, and it goes up past that. And this building is 20 plus feet. So that's that east elevation, which is right here. So we try to kind of show where that would happen. But also,
So is that this line right here that we're looking at that faces that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this right here is next to that big parking lot. And we've got a little entry area, comes in, just a simple downstairs floor plan.
Okay. Anything else?
4-bedroom,
Nice presentation.
2.5 bath.
So with that, is there anybody from the public wishing to address this project? Seeing nobody, are there any letters?
No, Mr. Chair, we don't have any public comment letters.
Does staff have any comments?
Just one staff comment. We would like for you, when reviewing this project, to consider the compatibility analysis considerations and put those into the motion.
Okay. Good. I'll return it back to the board for questions of the applicant. And if there are no burning questions, we'll move to comments.
I have a quick question. I'm wondering on this first floor why there's no windows on the east side.
We can certainly add windows.
There wasn't any specific reason. This is where you have the hedge over
Right.
there,
The hedge is pretty thick as it
be
is.
pretty dark.
And yeah, we can, if we added windows, we probably added them up high so we're not looking at the hedge, because we definitely want to keep it, because we don't want to see the apartment project that's across the way.
Got it. Okay.
And they don't want to see us.
Okay. Questions?
I can show you some photographs of that apartment project.
Why don't you just show it to him directly?
Sure. I did a nice job with changing the colors up, but it's pretty blocky, flat roof, 2-story. You can see that's kind of what's typical for the neighborhood. And most of the time they're doing 2-story all the way back.
Does someone else want to jump in? Yeah.
Sure, I do have a quick question. Can you just describe kind of what's going on, fenestration and on the adjacent neighbor here? Are those like bedrooms, or do we know? Or?
I know that there's right here there is a patio, a very small patio, like 6 feet by, and I believe that's either here or here. And there are a few windows in this location.
So that's that.
But it's
on grade.
No, it's not on grade. It's a second floor patio, a real small one. There's the vegetation is so dense here that it's hard to see them. I mean, it's easier to see what's happening from the other side. That's the front building. And so that's the architectural style of the 3 buildings that are along that side. But I'd have to probably define the fenestration. I'd probably have to pull the plans.
All right, let's jump to comments. Gary, you're up.
Here's a better picture.
Justin, I think it's a pretty good project. It's sited right. The 3 stories in the back of the lot. And that's a good place for it. So I don't have a lot of comments. Some of the comments I'd like to make is mostly has to do with fenestration, and like on the first floor where the garage is and a little bathroom, maybe to get some light or to get some fenestration in there where the garage would be
south elevation
would be nice. The other thing is that on the third element, where we have such an expansive roof, where you have that broken pitch roof, I think it might be nice to introduce a shed dormer, not only to let some light in there, but to kind of break up all of that roofing material. That would be the only comments I have.
Anybody want to jump in next? Keith?
Yeah, I just echo Gary's comments. Look for opportunities to get a little more balanced light in, and particularly that first floor. And then the only other comment would be on the
second floor.
On the second floor, or on the second floor, that bedroom. Just
I've never done that.
just studying the size and placement of those windows to avoid any potential privacy issues with the adjacent neighbor. That would be the only comment.
Somebody else?
I would just comment on the addition of, is this where you were talking, Keith?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to support that notion of adding a window along the eastern elevation on the first floor, even if it is higher up, to give you that privacy, but to get some additional light in there would be helpful. And then, of course, we'll look forward to a landscape plan next time.
Clay, you got anything? I'm going to take a slightly different approach. It's sided well and all that kind of stuff, but it's pretty darn tall. I'm looking at the plate heights. The first floor is 9 feet, the second floor is 9 feet, third floor is 8 feet. And I'm just, thinking that we can take a foot out of the second floor and make that an 8-foot plate, because the rooms up here are just bedrooms. And then I'm looking at the third floor, thinking over here with the 7 and 12 roof pitch, we can make that a 7-foot plate and go with a scissor truss with a volume ceiling, and already we dropped 2 feet out of the height, out of the building. Over the bedroom that's over the garage, which is the shed roof, you can volume the ceiling so they won't be pinched by lowering this to 8 feet is really just these two rooms. This still can be volume. And then taking this down to 7 foot at the plate, you can fur out these walls a little bit and create really a cool looking ceiling. Anything you can do to bring down the height. But this is a huge room. I mean, you don't have the dimensions on there, but my goodness gracious, you're going to be 15 by 13 in there and a huge walk-in closet. So you've got ample space, so I'd look for ways of softening it. But other than that, it's a good project. So we did questions, we did comments, we're now on to a motion.
2-week continuance.
2-week continuance.
Sure, I'll make the motion then. So this would be 2-week continuance back to full board.
Actually, I'm sorry. Before we do that, I forgot about this part. Compatibility. I'm just going to read through these things, and the people we'll go through and make some more additional comments. Compatible with the architectural character of the city and the neighborhood, appropriate size, bulk, and scale, sensitivity to landmarks and historical resources, public views, oceans and mountains, use of open space and landscaping. Based upon these couple of items, does anybody want to chime in with some additional comments about this project?
Mr. Chair, if I might, kind of a sidebar here, I think I'd be more comfortable making the compatibility findings after the next iteration where we kind of fill in the missing pieces. And, does the rest of the board kind of agree with that? Sure. Yeah. So you're very close. So get back to the motion. It would be 2-week continuance back to full board with the following comments. Overall, the board is supportive of the site planning and architectural design of the project, and has the following comments. Look for opportunities to introduce additional fenestration, particularly at the first floor, to provide additional light into the interior. Study the fenestration on the second floor, bedroom 3, to minimize or avoid any potential privacy conflicts with the neighbor. Third comment would be look for ways to reduce the height by potentially minimizing the second and third floor plate heights. And third would be return with a preliminary landscape plan.
Great. Is there someone who wants to second that motion? Second by Clay. Anything else to add? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And with that, since Mr. Henry Lenny is not in the building, we will close. So now here ends the ABR for January 10th, 2010.